A great football manager knows talent. A great producer knows great music. They may not be able to create it, but I think it's critical that in marketing, half the job, whether you're thinking of a great team member, a great executor, or a great way to approach something, half the job is knowing exactly where to look.
A lot of the fundamentals you learn in brand marketing, that's what sets you apart as a great product marketer. Getting really good at creative, getting really good at writing, getting really good at knowing what feels good and looks good from a design perspective, knowing how to create great video, that's actually what could make you a great product marketer.
Sam Altman came out recently and said AI will replace 95% of marketing stuff. And his view is that the most important skill is going to be critical thinking and in this week's Memes and Machines, lessons learned from Humane, the company that promised a hardware revolution. The good, the bad, the ugly, what do marketeers need to know? We discuss UGC AI avatar TikTok creators. Is that a thing? What does it even mean? We dive into the story of Cameo, a phenomenal business that has gone through many hardships. Why are they not succeeding? And what can we learn? Brand versus product. What can brands learn from product marketeers and vice versa? And finally, we conclude with the most underrated skills in marketing, not one to be missed. Catman, what you saying?
An episode filled with technical difficulties and marketing insight.
It was just adversity. You got kicked out of a room, internet connections. You know what? We show up regardless. One foot in front of the other, we show up. Catman, always good to see your face. I saw you went on a little adventure recently. Tell me about it.
Yeah, spent the weekend in Miami. A real-life GTA server, the best way I can describe that place. Yeah, had a lot of fun celebrating a good friend's 30th birthday. And I think the big takeaway from the trip is that sausage fests are underrated. That was what we decided.
Keep it PC, my man. Keep it PC. I don't want to know what you get up to in your spare time. I agree. There's this really funny thing. Some of my most memorable, enjoyable experiences, and it's been said before, there is something about just getting with the boys and you could literally be in a field doing nothing and have fun. There is just something magical about being, having that space where you can just be with the boys. I agree.
Yeah. And as you get older, it gets, more and more difficult for that to happen. So I think, it was a good reminder that you have to put the effort in and, give ourselves those joyful moments.
Can I ask a question about Miami? I've not been for a few months. In fact, probably August last year was the last time I went. I've always had a good time in Miami, enjoy the place. With the crypto enthusiasm, let's not say this week, but just general momentum in Web3, is Miami popping? Is it the crypto mecca of the US?
I think Miami's always popping. I don't think crypto had as big a influence on the place as people maybe thought. I think because we, live our lives online, we see everybody saying how they're moving from San Francisco to Miami, and we thought that, that's going to transform the place. But I think Miami's Miami. It's got people who have been there their whole lives. It's predominantly a Spanish-speaking place. I think a lot of people don't realize. Yeah. I think it's just one of the most colorful, insane, expressive, exciting places in the world. I love it. And it feels almost like one of those kind of reality feels a little bit distorted there. And so, to be honest, I don't feel that. And maybe that's because I'm going to vacation. I'm not working. I'm not in the co-working spaces. I'm not doing coffees with people or at conferences. But to me, it just seems like a place that's always having fun 24/7.
Yeah, loud, vibrant, passionate. It's got that strong Hispanic sort of influence everywhere in a really meaningful way. I've always had a great time in Miami. Although I would say people I know who live there are really over it in a different way to how, how people make New York their identity, and they're New York diehards. It's like they love it regardless of, whatever anyone says to them, they absolutely adore it. I think Miami people who've been there long enough kind of go, you know what, if I have fun all the time, there's maybe too much of a good thing. So my experience has probably been similar to yours, but I do hear a different side to the city, Absolutely. My man, so what's happened? There's been a few interesting things come out in the news. Number one I wanted to talk to you about is a product that we gave a critique to, Humane, has officially got in the hands of people. So firstly, a bit of a recap. What is Humane? What happened this week? And what did you find interesting about the whole conversation?
Yeah, Humane is one of these new AI hardware products. Basically a pin that can listen to and speak back to you using an AI kind of agent. You tap it, you ask it a question, you ask it to send a text, you ask it to take a photo, it has a camera. So it's meant to be one of these kind of AI personal assistants, but in a hardware device. I feel like it's had criticism from day one. So even from like the launch video, I think we spoke about it, where the founders kind of lacked a certain charisma. It felt very robotic. And I think the general overarching criticism I saw was that it was a bit of a Steve Jobs copycat. The two founders had, come from Apple, had been there under Steve Jobs's tenure. So I think there were some parallels people were pulling. But overall, it's had this kind of constant, criticism of the rollout, criticism of the way they presented themselves. And finally, the product gets in people's hands this week, and overwhelmingly poor reviews. And the big interesting narrative here is that, they have been very public in the way they've gone about things. So all of their employees, all their team members are on Twitter talking about the huge amount of work they're doing, very publicly raised a significant amount of money. And when you do that, you immediately have people who are kind of looking for you to fail. They love a good takedown story. And so I felt that was kind of always, waiting in the wings, people waiting to kind of pounce on that. The real dagger was a very, kind of the most prominent YouTube tech reviewer, Marques Brownlee. He's the kind of like the face of YouTube tech reviews. He's the kind of number one. He's the Mr. Beast of YouTube tech reviews, and he called it the worst product he'd ever reviewed. And for one set of people, they loved this. It was, it was the kind of cherry on the top of their takedown. This product was a waste of money. This product was a waste of time. However, there was a lot of sympathetic views as well. People saying that as a reviewer, he's kind of undermined and almost destroyed months and months of hard work of all these people who have put time and effort in, and he should have an ethical responsibility to not put out content which could potentially end the business, as many people saw. I think my view here is that that's quite a dramatic way of looking at one person's influence. He obviously is very influential, but if the product is truly great in the future and they build on it, they work on it, then one bad review at the start shouldn't really make a difference. And I actually think, if anything, the marketing team have done a pretty good job here. Everybody has heard of this thing. Everybody's looking at it. To be honest, I don't look at the marketing team. It's not really their responsibility for the product to be great. Obviously, they have a responsibility to their career to choose a great product to market, but it's very difficult to tell, and they're buying into the vision of, two very experienced founders. And so I don't actually blame them. And to be honest, they've done a really great job of getting this everywhere, getting it in front of people, and the market will decide where it goes. But yeah, it's definitely been an interesting conversation. I've seen a few debates held about this.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story for all the reasons you highlight. And if I think of the first point around the founder story, I think there's lessons to be learned around, as a pair, they came with expectations. They raised hundreds of millions. They really leveraged their Apple pedigree. And as
Yeah.
a, lead product team, you kind of, and the promises to revolutionize hardware and really leverage AI and build from the ground up. And people forget that this company, I believe, is 5 or 6 years old, raised hundreds of millions over five or
really.
six, and people just started to get impatient. What they did do is they executed with haste around the AI momentum wave, and they capitalized on the opportunity that presented. But in hindsight and retrospect, there's a strong argument to suggest that that could be somewhat of a fatal error. And don't get me wrong, I have empathy. Imagine your mandate being, we are going to revolutionize hardware. Like, the mobile phone has not been displaced. There's been a few, the tablet, a large mobile phone in effect, has kind of been another product. But if you're talking about nothing has displaced the mobile in 30 years in a meaningful way, and you come out and suggest that that's what you're going to do, like, A, audacious, B, bravo, big lofty mission, your chance of succeeding, almost non-existent. But I think the lessons are, be careful what you wish for. If you want all the attention and all the pedigree, at some point you're going to be held to account in public with all that attention. So there is part of me, and we've said this about social media, it's like think of all the hysteria around Threads, and it was Meta's first social media launch, and all the attention and enthusiasm and the narratives that many people, including myself, propagate. If Meta launched something new, you should try it, because if it does succeed, all your advantages are early. Like, think of all that. And then your point in that whole debate is, well, the best social media apps are usually groundswell up. They're very authentic in how they gain traction and find a place in the world. And you see this time and time and time and time again. And there is something about these big expectation launches where the vast majority of them will never meet those expectations. So there's probably someone in a basement somewhere who has created some revolutionary hardware. And we don't know, because they don't have hundreds of millions of dollars behind them per se. They aren't maybe leveraging their past pedigree to garner that attention. So I think there's lessons to be learned in just if you're building a business, what levers you have and how you have to meet expectations, and the difficulties of meeting those lofty ambitions, etc. And then the second part is everything you raised around the debate that ensued of, at what point do creators now have that moral responsibility? And it's a difficult question, right? As a tech reviewer, you build your credibility because your only obligation is to the audience. Along the way, brands come in and start paying you and want your attention and want you to say nice things about them. But fundamentally, I think, Marcus's responsibility is to his audience. I would argue the debate is, you suddenly, when you have such a big platform, you have a responsibility to not play hyperbolic games. So I think the big critique was not the fact that he didn't like the product, the fact that he said this is the worst product that he has ever used in the headline. And if you think of that, that's probably a big statement from a person who makes a living. That's kind of playing the algorithm game. That's kind of doing it for the attention, as opposed to maybe being sincere. Maybe not. Maybe it is literally that bad. But there's part of me goes, I don't see it being the worst product ever. But maybe it is. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, he's a YouTuber. His currency is attention. He has to get clicks. So that is the game YouTubers play. They have to be hyperbolic. He said it's the worst product he's ever reviewed, right? So that is that comes from a point of truth, right? He knows every product he's reviewed. And if he hasn't said that previously, then it's fair game for him to say that. Nobody can argue with that. It's a personal opinion, right? So I think it's pretty, and actually the head of new media for Humane. So the great thing about this, very typically, everybody's getting very upset with Marques Brownlee saying that you shouldn't take this company down. The head of media at Humane quoted him and said, "Thank you for the review. This is great. This is really helpful feedback." That's actually the opinion that matters.
That is perfect response, right?
He said feedback is a gift. This is exactly what we need. And to be honest, it's got huge exposure for Humane. I know that, all press is bad press is probably bullshit, but I think in a lot of ways it's introduced people to the mission. The next product has to be better, but now everybody knows who they are. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting one. I would say as well, I completely agree that it's very risky to start your company mission from a place of let's replace something that everybody uses, right? So when you say we're going to replace the iPhone, what you're actually telling to people is the way you currently live your life is wrong. And so it comes from a place of almost like people take it personally when a product comes out and says, you should be living your life completely differently. So they're immediately looking to pick holes in that and say, well, this isn't actually going to replace my phone. I'm very happy with the way that I live my life. And I feel like the best products, they just build great stuff and it replaces their old life without them really realizing. Like iPod didn't come out and say, we're going to replace the CD player. They just made a great product and it did. And so I think when you have these kind of lofty targets, ambitions, like you said, it's much easier for people to then say you failed rather than if they just said, we're going to build something cool and see if you like it. Well, yeah, they achieved that. People didn't like it.
Yeah. And maybe there's that piece around like, we're building products, we're building hardware around modern AI capabilities, right? There's a repositioning, not, I suppose it's the fatal trap of ego. And when you have the adulation of the world and, all the good stuff's happening and the attention and the excitement. But you're right, in everything that we've just explored and everything you just said there, the number one, I suppose, marketing takeaway for me that's really tangible is how you respond to crisis. And there is just something about humility and just owning a mistake. And by just coming out and saying we value feedback, the simplicity, the beauty, actually I suddenly, you said that and I went, I kind of respect this company now. And there was part of me that didn't before this point. There's things I like, there's things I did. I didn't form a strong opinion, if I'm being very honest. But you say that and I go, actually, I quite like this business now. Maybe there's even, if they were brave enough, they could play on all these bad reviews and kind of turn it into a win. There is a world where you can turn negativity in a win, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is good. Something else on AI that I thought was really interesting, it wasn't from this week, but it's been in the last week, was I read an article about TikTok beta testing some AI avatar technology with their advertisers. So in effect, TikTok are now allowing certain people to test ads that are wholly AI generated, and they're calling them like UGC AI, which is ridiculous because UGC is user-generated content, AI is artificially created content. So let's park the framing for a second. But it is really interesting to see TikTok, that has always been a platform that has introduced creative capabilities into what is a discovery engine, but has been seen as a social media network. The world views TikTok as a social media network. TikTok view themselves as an entertainment platform, and I think creators see it as a place to express. So giving creators and advertisers a new tool to use AI capabilities and digital avatars, I think it was an obvious step forward. What's really interesting about this story and the test is they found the efficacy and effectiveness of AI-generated ads were far less effective. So if you consider that, you go, why? AI can be perfect, you can curate things in a way, and I think it speaks a lot to social media. Social media is beautiful because it's imperfect. Great advertising is usually absurd and irrational. And there's something about the rationality of AI, and you can imagine an avatar saying the perfect thing about a product, and you can see why that wouldn't be effective. And all the data that's coming out of this pilot substantiates that. So in part, I go, is TikTok making a play to own end-to-end distribution of content creation and the ad product itself, the distribution? Or in part, is this just a general test to understand, like, how would advertisers interact with these new functionalities? How would creators leverage this technology? I'd imagine it's a bit of all of the above, right? They're just trying to learn some stuff. But it's a really interesting example of AI being used in marketing. What are your thoughts? What's your initial gut reaction?
It feels like, in general, all these ad platforms are trying to figure out how to make it as easy as possible to run ads, right? So, like, I remember when we first started seriously running Facebook ads, probably 8 to 10 years ago. You needed like somebody who was like a gigabrain mathematician who had all these kind of audience filters, and it was super complicated. If you use most ad products today, the platform can basically do it all for you. Apart from like the initial audience setup, in terms of placement and optimizing for where your ads show up, whether it's using machine learning or whatever it is, it actually makes it very, very easy. And a lot of the placement, a lot of the work that used to go into ad placement is now just done by AI or done by, the platforms themselves. And so, like, I saw that gradually, right, where these platforms are introducing tools where they're kind of lowering barrier to entry to the point where, a random sweet shop owner in the middle of nowhere who's barely picked up a phone can probably run ads in their localized area on Facebook. Like, I think that's the place they're trying to get to. And so it makes sense that they're going to slowly introduce tools. If they can create a tool where it's going to recreate what is probably the best performing ad format, which is UGC, if they can introduce a tool which someone at a click of a button can show that, then it makes a lot of sense. I think, like you said, it sounds like they're probably just low performing because the AI is still not 100% there yet, where you still have that kind of question mark in your mind, like, is this real? It feels a little bit off. And like you said, I don't think we've seen AI that replicates human creativity in a really meaningful way yet, because there is so much, like you said, irrational things that don't quite make sense in terms of our decision making, that AI hasn't got there yet. And I think the argument people say is that it will one day, and maybe it will. But it's difficult to say whether that's going to exist on an ad platform or not.
Yeah. As you were describing that, I was thinking through, my mind was going to a few places. Number one, I think a little bit about the skills in marketing. And it's a question we keep asking ourselves, the role of agencies, what skills are going to be valuable as more and more technology is embedded into our work. And Sam Altman came out recently, and he famously, maybe a month ago, had said AI will replace 95% of marketing stuff. This is from a person running an AI company, so of course, but there is some truth in that. AI will replace a lot of things that we currently do in marketing. It will replace a lot of things across many services. What was really interesting recently, he said, what skills do you think are going to be valuable in when AI augments more of our lives? And his number one skill was creativity. So this is a person really at the epicenter of and at the forefront of AI innovation. And his view is that the most important skill is going to be critical thinking and creativity, which are innately human. And it does speak volumes about maybe the limitations of where AI will go, not indefinitely, but maybe in the near term, in the next 5 years or so, whether they're intentional limitations or not. But it was like really interesting. And then I go, okay, well, if we are going to have these tools and these ad products, and I will say you did say something else, which was they're not quite there yet. That's kind of true, but I used, I'll send you a link after, but I looked at a tool that basically does this UGC. So this is a third-party tool that does this UGC content creation. And actually, it produces videos up to like 3 minutes. And you can pick just normal people that have licensed their face and their voice. And they're in different settings. They might be sat in a car or might be done something. And being honest, for like 15 seconds, it's very difficult to tell it's AI. After then, something tells you. And if I think of the nature of just ads on social, the pacing, and they're so dynamic, and you're cutting different voices, that I see a world where you could probably get away with it today with a smart editor human intervention. I don't think AI on its own can fool anybody today, or shouldn't be able to. Will that be the case in a few years? Verdict's out. But it was really interesting. I think you'd be surprised when you see some of the kind of just these third-party tools that really are incredible. So yeah, I don't know where we head with this. I just know the only response anyone in the industry has is stay curious, stay humble around our opinions, and play. I think it's like a fascinating time to just rethink everything.
Yeah.
And that's a bit that excites me.
Yeah, I think assume everything you know up to now is probably going to be useless.
Yeah. And probably social media was maybe like the last time brands and marketeers, we've built a career in social media, so we're coming from a more modern place. But I imagine if you were a seasoned marketeer for many years, you really had to rethink all these things you knew to be true.
Better.
Not around principles of marketing, because the one thing throughout all this change, or the one thing that doesn't change throughout all this evolution is people. And a marketer's job is always about understanding people and then communicating with them in effective ways, right? So that doesn't change, but everything else around us does. So yeah, it's a fascinating time for marketeers. There was another story I thought was interesting. I'd love to get your take. And it's more a macro story, so not necessarily marketing. But Cameo recently, and Cameo being the app where you can just pick celebrities and you can usually send like novel birthday messages and get access to C-cast, reality stars, and pay £50 and send your friend a message or a video. They did some really interesting innovations around AI, around children's animations, and recreating and using generative AI to create a new business model or to create a new stream. They called it Cameo Kids. So I've long championed Cameo for as a really interesting business, and that was reflected in the fact that Cameo was worth $1 billion at one point. And more recently, they just had a new funding round where they were valued at 100 million. And this kind of raised some red flags in the industry, and people started to look under the hood. And it appears that 90% of their staff have been let go. 90%. And you start to question why. What's happening? Well, is it AI? In the world of voice synthesis and avatars, do we even need Cameo to do the official and the real person in that whole equation? And when you look at it a little deeper, you go, maybe there's some truth in that. But I'd say they're probably well positioned to take advantage because they have the infrastructure, they have the relationships, they have the network, they have the platform, they have the user base, the awareness. They're really well placed to lean into AI, to pioneer a new type of business model that's very closely linked to what they do and arguably could make much greater margins from it. What I think is a broader point that everyone should consider is think of brands like Coca-Cola, or think of McDonald's, or think of a fashion brand that you create some sense of loyalty to. These types of businesses, when you acquire a customer, they may be with you for life, or they may have a sense of loyalty. The problem with a business model like Cameo is it's so expensive and so difficult to acquire a net new customer. If your product is a one and done, or a 1, 2, 3 and done, really that's a very difficult business to scale because you are on that hedonistic treadmill of growth. So I suppose my thought or question to you is, how do businesses that aren't able to create truly lifetime value customers, there are just many businesses that just aren't building products and services that can service someone through their whole life. For those businesses, what advice and tips do you have when you think about your marketing activity? And is the, I suppose, underlying point that really we should be building businesses that have the propensity or potential to stay with someone for their whole life?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to have any other opinion really than it's just not a great business model. And I actually think, and this is really not really marketing at all, but I think the biggest danger here is just don't chase valuations. Don't chase huge inflated valuations. I think they probably raised at $1 billion valuation at a time when, that was easy, when interest rates were very low and money was very cheap in general. We've seen this in a number of places. And I think people forgot that, tech valuations aren't real. Like, there's no liquidity there. No one's actually got $1 billion in the bank. What you do is when you put $1 billion, when you put $1 billion price on your head, all of a sudden your expectations are that you need to become a $10 billion business for that to be a success, right? Like, it's the same if you raise at $100 million valuation, $1 billion is a success, anything less is a failure. And so people need to understand the expectations when they put these crazy inflated valuations on their heads. What also happens is you get a bunch of employees who join the company at that time, right? And they all have equity, which is at a strike price, which is of that valuation, $1 billion, whatever it is. The minute you come below that, so when you do a round that goes to $100 million, every single one of those employees is underwater. They have $0 in equity, and I just can't imagine what the morale, of a team like that is like. And so I've seen this in a few times where a lot of companies chase these crazy inflated valuations that don't actually mean anything, and then you're kind of doomed beyond that, because if you can't reach the scale, which it sounds like here, like you said, it sounds like it's going to be a huge struggle. It's very expensive to acquire a customer, and then very difficult to keep that customer coming back every single month. I think I've used Cameo once. I'm not gonna. It's not like a regular in my gift arsenal. I'll probably use it maybe 2 or 3 times again in my lifetime. So I think you're right.
Who did you buy?
I bought a. It's embarrassing. I bought a Ricky Gervais lookalike.
So it wasn't Ricky Gervais.
It was David Brent. Somebody doing a David Brent impression, because Ricky Gervais isn't on Cameo.
Wow, I don't think that's worse than mine. Mine, the only purchase I got was a Wagner. It was Wagner off. There's a birthday message. X-Factor.
Yeah. So the lifetime value of the customer is probably like less than £500, less than £1,000. So yeah,
and their business models are commission based. So 80%, I assume 80-70% will go to the creator themselves, right? So the economics of that are even put under more strain. So to the end user, I'm spending $100, $500, $1,000, whatever the number is. That's what I'm spending. I'm not going to be in a haste to go do that again, unless it's going to add value. And you know what? I think there's another cautionary tale in that whole equation where I go, everything about that business I like and I get excited about. The fact that they have like inbuilt network effect. The idea that like they've got a business where it's built around content creation. And when I receive that gift, I tell the world and it's watermarked with Cameo. They have like these marketing hacks that probably mean they acquire customers at such a low cost compared to most businesses. So me as a marketeer, I look at that and go, genius. They have some product marketing levers that make this a great company. They're working with celebrity, entertainment, they could take advantage of AI. And then I am reminded, building a brand is really difficult. Building a customer base, and I'll tell you another tale that's very similar. There's similar stories around Prime. Prime's success now is being, it was all anyone in marketing talked about, because you have this outlier success that is a creator-led brand that flooded the internet relentlessly for months, sold out everywhere, hysteria, sponsored every club and sporting asset they possibly could to build pedigree. And now they are in bargain buckets, and sales in the UK, I don't know if it's the same across the US, have cut in half. Demand has dropped. And it really comes down to the fact that people just say the product's too sweet and it's not very good, right? And like the whole story in this, and it's a little bit around the humane. There is this narrative of a marketeer's job can only go so far. at the end of the day, if you're building a business, the number one thing you have to get right is your product or your service. We have limitations in the majestic nature of marketing and the magic involved with capturing people's attention and telling stories. It's a wonderful job. It's why we choose it. But there are goddamn limitations.
Yeah, the fastest way to kill a bad product is with great marketing.
Yes. Yeah, Humane's a great example. Is that a cattyism, or where have you read that?
No, I read that. I read that somewhere. I don't know.
Hands on keyboard must be yours, though. I feel like you've...
Hands on keyboard is mine. No, I think that is mine.
Just take the credit. Building off that topic a little bit, you've had a really interesting career in the sense that you started as a content creator. You leveraged those skills to effectively become a creative and brand marketeer. By large, not exclusively, but most of your time was spent around creative endeavors for big brands. And now you're becoming a seasoned product B2B marketeer in many respects. My question to you is, through those 2 chapters or even 3 chapters in your career, what lessons can be learned? So what lessons can brand marketeers learn from product marketeers and vice versa?
Yeah, I think I was really surprised when I started doing product marketing that actually a lot of the fundamentals you learn in brand marketing, that's what sets you apart as a great product marketer. So if you think about things in product marketing which are maybe a bit different to brand marketing, that is things like, email sequencing, funnels, creating landing pages that convert. I would say that stuff can be learned, right? Quite quickly. There's usually a playbook you can work with someone on. There's, a lot of literature in the industry that you can read about how to do this stuff. But actually the stuff that sets you apart as a great product marketer is being able to create great content from a brand perspective.
Yeah.
So being able to, write a great one-liner about a product that can convert 5-10% better than somebody else's can, that's going to be the thing that sets you apart. So what I would say is that actually being a really good creative, getting really good at creative, getting really good at writing, getting really good at knowing what feels good and looks good from a design perspective, knowing how to create great video, that's actually what can make you a great product marketer. Because so much great product marketing today, I think, is very close to brand marketing.
So on that,
I've spoken a few times about...
I was just going to say, so on that, would you say it's kind of the premise is learn the hard thing first, and actually it's all, in fact, I'd probably go as far as saying it's more about learning the art first and the science after. That's probably the sequence of your career, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, you could probably do it the other way around as well, but I think getting the art right first it makes every kind of component of marketing a little bit easier. And yeah, like I said, I think product marketing is becoming indistinguishable from brand marketing. I think because there's so much out there now, because there are so many choices, why would I go and choose this product over another one? Actually buying into the brand and buying into the story is a big reason. I talk about Arc Browser quite a lot, and I think they're a great example of this, where their brand marketing and their product marketing are kind of indistinguishable. They create a lot of content around the story of the company. They get their founder on camera who's speaking a lot about his mission, his vision, but also at the same time, interlaced with that is, here's a huge new feature we dropped. Here's why we built it. Here's the person who designed that feature talking about it. It's actually kind of this kind of murky water between brand and product, but it gets way more eyeballs than regular product marketing would, which is a, kind of boring animation showing a mouse clicking in a few places.
I imagine there's a sense of pride amongst the team that are building as well. It's almost this like co-creation behavior. We talk a lot about co-creating with your customers, finding mechanisms to encourage them to share and participate in whatever you're doing. They've gone a step further and really championed their employees and their team members, and it gives the human voice, but literally, not we are trying to sound more like people and less like a company. It is literally people. Reminded me a bit of ASOS did a very cool initiative back in the day on social where they set up a sub-account that was basically styled by ASOS. And it was all the stylists, and the buyers and the merchandisers. And it seemed like a really common thing to do, to kind of put faces. But it isn't something that I see talked about as often now. And it sounds like ARC very much embody that, not in an intentional way, but they've made it part of their DNA to use the voices and assets in a way that just ladders up to their broader mission, which is like creating things in a really transparent way that's better than what existed before.
I think it's as simple as people are more likely to keep watching, right? Like if I scroll past and I see someone talking, they look animated, they look passionate, I'm going to stick around for a second longer to see what they're saying. If I scroll past something and it's like, a screen recording of somebody using a product on their Mac, I'm probably just going to scroll past. So I think it's just like in the fight for attention, we know that people speaking to camera tends to perform better. And so I think very simply, that's why we're seeing a lot of product marketing going in that direction.
What do brand marketers learn from product marketers that I would argue, and I'm being a generalist, but I am saying probably more data, experimental, reiterative in mentality, a bit more structured in how they make decisions. Do you think there's a value add when you're thinking more about big brand creativity by, I suppose, applying some of the product marketing playbooks?
Yeah, I think the way product marketers think about conversion as a really important metric is something that brand marketers can learn. I think brand marketers sometimes get obsessed with impressions. Let's just get people to see something. But then are they actually going to buy that product? Are they actually going to, convert somewhere further down the funnel? It's usually not, kind of not considered. Whereas from a product marketing perspective, you're obsessing over when they click here, how many percentage of people are actually going to then click here, and how many of them are going to set up an account, right? So you're constantly thinking about the conversion of your eyeballs. I think brand marketers should always be thinking about that. Like if I'm doing a whole host of marketing around a campaign, can people actually view that product and buy it? Like, is it actually really easy and visible and simple for them to do so? The number of times I've seen like a great ad for something on Instagram, and I'm like, okay, well, how do I actually buy this thing? And I have to then sometimes I have to go Google and search for the thing I thought I saw. You've lost the chance to really convert that. And so, I think it's like being really intentional about whether your eyeballs actually convert.
The reality for me is that each marketing discipline, there are good things and there are bad things. And I think if you're developing a career, having exposure to different types of companies, but also, being multidisciplinary is a huge advantage for you to, I suppose, pursue being more well-rounded and just more effective. On that point, I want to kind of conclude with your thoughts on underrated skills in marketing. So I want to play a game whereby you just give me like an underrated skill and we'll see how many we can get through and just explain why. So I'm going to let you go first, Catman, because you have a new backdrop. You've just been kicked out of a room. I don't know how anyone dare do that to you, being honest. The audacity. He's definitely not following pathetic fashion, I know that, or wearing a third wear hoodie. But give me your most underrated skill in marketing. Go.
Good taste.
Good taste. Okay, I'm going to say knowing where to look. I think it's critical that in marketing, half the job, whether you're thinking of a great team member, a great executor, or a great way to approach something, half the job is knowing exactly where to look.
What do you mean by where to look?
I mean where to look in, hey, I have a problem, what tools can help me? I need to do this specific type of design work. Who's the best designer in this field, or who are the best specialists? I need a framework that supports this type of sector. Where do I go? Where do I look? I actually think having the experience of knowledge and understanding and the references is a real underrated skill in marketing.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes back to good taste as well, right? Like, do these people have a Rolodex and great photographers, great designers, great video editors that they can call on? I think that's super powerful. But I've always found good taste is hard to quantify. It's I think the reason it's underrated because it's pretty much impossible to measure for, right? But being able to look at an ad and say, like, does that look trash or does that look great? I think is super powerful. But it's something that I think a lot of marketers don't actually have.
Yeah, it's everything, right? It's almost everything. It's how a great football manager knows talent, a great producer knows great music. They may not be able to create it, but knowing what good is, you can create a hell of a lot of value just being a tastemaker. Yeah, I'm preaching to the converted. I would say another one is some of the best, particularly social marketeers, they're very funny. I think funny is a massively underrated skill in marketing.
That's a good one. How do you measure for humor?
How do you measure for humor? Likes? No, I'm joking. How do you measure for humor? I think there's some people just have a witty way of characterizing the world. So of course there are people that just make funny observations. They usually have a bit of a quirk, a charm. They're a little odd at times. They're not as conventional.
I think don't take themselves too seriously.
Yes, that's another one. They don't have the egos associated. I think funny is a superpower.
I'd say final one for me is independent thought, which I think is in general like a big one for I think any employee. But for me, when I interview people, I really dig into the question I always ask is like, was there anything you did in your last role that you thought didn't work? Right? Or you thought did work? And I want to hear like what do they really think, not what they were told to do, right? A lot of time you work with people who they slot into an existing strategy or an existing framework, they execute it really well and they get good results. But you need someone who is actually sitting back and looking at everything that you're doing from a marketing perspective and questioning to themselves, does this shit actually work? And this is something that we're not doing. So like just being an independent thinker, it's actually very hard to come by now. So yeah, it's a big one for me.
I agree. Last one I'm going to go with is people that understand the world around them. I think it's a really, as in, I'll give you an example. I think it's a massive aid to creativity. And Mr. Beast did an interview, and one of the things I found him to say that was really interesting was this idea of this thirst for finding out new things and knowing the world around him. And the example he gave is like, I go down a rabbit hole to learn about this obscure flower that does a certain thing in Japan. And I now have that in my toolkit to be able to create around. He said, the minute I stop learning those things, the minute I stop like learning the world around me, is my abilities stifle. They stagnate. So I think as marketeers, and you could bucket that into being really curious, having this like insatiable thirst for learning new things, alongside then if you pair that with an understanding of the world around you, I just think it gives you so many advantages when you're trying to connect ideas from brands or themes. You're trying to connect them to make them impactful. I think it's a real superpower.
Yeah.
On that note, my man, always a pleasure speaking to you, and I will catch you next week.
See you.